Giraffe Social Media Podcast. It's what social media managers are talking about. I'm Chloe Belchamber, and on today's episode, I am joined by some brilliant members of the Giraffe team. We've got Senior Social Media Manager Nicole.
Hi.
We've got Social Media Manager Laura.
Hello.
And Social Media Manager Jordan.
Hello.
In today's April Newsfeed review, we're going to be chatting about some of the major things that happened on social last month, including Pinterest's first ever B2b campaign, new updates on some of our favourite platforms, and of course, Nebraska's Duel of Joshes. But before we get started, it's time for our team question. I want to know, guys, what was your highlight of April? What was some good things that happened to you last month? Jordan, let's start with you.
I would say mine would be being able to see friends. I mean, I was all about going on a walk every now and then. It was great. But there's so much walking you could do, I feel. So it was just nice to maybe see them in a different environment. Yeah, that'd be my main highlight.
Yeah, I think we can all agree with that one. Nicole, what about you?
Well, I had a birthday very recently, last Saturday, which timed up very nicely with the reopening of sort of outdoor seating and being able to go out for food and meals and drinks and stuff. So that was really nice. And we had amazing weather as well. So I was, #blessed for that weekend. It was so good. And I was one of the... I almost thought I was going to have 2 birthdays in lockdown, but I guess this one's, not a complete lockdown, so I will take it. So that was a highlight for me.
You lucky thing. Last year I didn't have a lockdown birthday, and I'm pretty sure I won't have one this year unless things go absolutely terribly. So not to flex on you.
Amazing. Yeah.
Laura, what about you? What's happened in April?
I think a combination of both what Jordan and Nicole said. So I also had a birthday in April and was able to see and celebrate it with friends, which is something obviously didn't get to do last year. Yes. So that was definitely a big highlight for me. I think it sort of just gave me like a taster of like what's going to be coming for the rest of the year.
It feels good, doesn't it? It feels so sweet.
It does. It's like there is an end in sight. It's coming.
Absolutely. I mean, we're almost in May now, which means we're almost in June. So it's pretty much over, guys.
It is.
Well, speaking of lockdown-related things, I would say my highlight in April, and this seems a little self-centered compared to everyone saying, oh, my friends, but I finally got my hair done in April with the hairdressers reopening, which... It was a very big deal for me. I think it was coming up on a year since I had last had it done, which if you're a blonde, it gets pretty dire after about 3 months. So happy to have had that done, and yeah, now I can go and see people. I look presentable. Right, well, let's get into our first story. Laura, I know LinkedIn is hoping to address employment gaps with some new job titles. Am I right?
Yes, yeah. So LinkedIn have recently released some updates on its platform to address people's concern regarding the employment gap, like due to obviously COVID and lockdown and all of that. To address employment gaps, LinkedIn have added job titles like stay-at-home dad, stay-at-home mum, stay-at-home parent, all kind of job titles like that. So that members using these job titles don't even need to specify a company or an employer in the coming weeks. So basically it means that obviously people that have sort of come out of work due to the pandemic can just set their status. They don't need an explanation as to kind of what's happened. It's like they still had a job to do by being a stay-at-home parent. And I think it just helps sort of end... Well, I hope that it ends the stigma of like being unemployed as well. I don't know what you guys think. I know that LinkedIn also plan to address the employment gaps with new sort of fields. I think they're planning to sort of expand on that in the near future. But yeah, what do you guys think?
I think that's really cool. I think it's such a cool thing that LinkedIn have acknowledged a problem and they're, you know, almost trying to come up with a way to help solve it. You know, I mean, a lot of people, because of COVID, will have some employment gaps. So why not let people put in other roles that they've been doing that aren't necessarily linked to a company, like you said, Laura? I think that's really cool. I love it when different platforms or even just businesses in general like do something that's going to have a positive impact. Like, I don't think there's really any negatives to that unless people, I don't know, abuse that sort of system that you can use. But it sounds like it's got a really positive cause behind it. So I'm all for that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, like I was saying before, it's just really important. Like, the new fields that LinkedIn plan to sort of address will be like paternity leave and family care and all of that. Because I think there's such like a stereotype that if you're unemployed, like, you're lazy and you're not doing anything, and like that's your career over kind of thing. But the reality is, like, you know, our lives revolve, which they shouldn't do, around jobs. So to kind of position, I think, for LinkedIn to try and like get people that are unemployed sort of position themselves a bit differently, and sort of not, and eliminate that shame as well that can occur. No, I think I agree with you, Nicole. I think it's a really good idea, and I think of all platforms to do something like this, LinkedIn is the best one.
I think it's also great, isn't it? Because, you know, some people are popping it up because they've got a gap in employment, and some people, like, being a full-time mum, being a mum is a full-time job. So I think it's nice to kind of acknowledge that. I think for a long time there's been a misconception that being a stay-at-home parent or that kind of thing is, not considered a job, and it must be so easy, like, not working. But no, like, it's really cool that LinkedIn is acknowledging this as like a proper role, which I think is super cool, as well as it also being like a nice touch for people who are just doing it temporarily.
Yeah, for sure.
I was just going to sort of say, I sort of agree with what you said. I think there's a whole negativity or stigma around not having a job and being unemployed. And I think after the year that we've had, with so many people losing their jobs and stuff like that, I just think that it's just become a lot easier to talk about and easier to, I don't know about deal with, but easier to understand why people may not have jobs and how it feels to be unemployed and things like that. And really appreciate sort of the jobs that maybe we didn't think about before, like a stay-at-home mum or dad, and how hard that can be. But yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think we're all really nice people, and saying how it's like a really nice thing that LinkedIn are doing, but also LinkedIn are smart people and know that this will bring more people into the platform. You know, maybe a lot of people don't want to use LinkedIn because they're like, oh, I don't have a current job, so why would I use the platform? But they're actually encouraging people who maybe don't have a job at the moment currently, or they have a big gap, to say like, no, you can still come and use the platform. You know, it doesn't matter. You can fill in these gaps with these certain titles and things like that. So it's also a smart job by LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, well, speaking of new features, Jordan, what's this I've heard about Twitter's plans to introduce super follows on the platform?
Yeah, so I wanted to run it past you guys just to see what you thought. But I've seen that Twitter have been sort of testing out at the moment just a super follow button and a tipping button as well. So basically, I think from what I understand is you can obviously follow accounts on there. So after following someone, a new button will appear, which will be a super follow, which is basically like a subscription. So users would actually have to pay to see exclusive content and things like that. And obviously there'll be a tipping button as well, which is where users can actually tip or pay the person whose account it is. Yes, there's also audio rooms, and it's just sort of all about more exclusivity. And I personally think it could be a way for Twitter to maybe have their own kind of creators and pay people. I think the whole thing with TikTok now and Instagram, I think maybe Twitter is maybe lacking in that department. So they do need sort of their own kind of content creators and that kind of thing. But I just wanted to get your idea on sort of, would you maybe subscribe to anyone, or is there any content you'd pay to see on Twitter?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, I personally don't use Twitter, just because it's very intimidating to me. But I think it's something really good that most people can use, and I'm not sure if it would, like, if you could allow this, but I know that like journalism is a massive thing, and you know, you try and subscribe to people online so that you can get the news, so this could be a really cool way for them to deliver that kind of content through Twitter as well. I mean, I'm not across like Twitter creators as per se, but I can imagine that like there will be so many people that can jump on this. So like Patreon's a really big thing in the US at the moment, where you pay for that exclusive content. So good for Twitter.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it may have come up in a previous podcast, like the idea of Patreon and paying for exclusive content from creators, and I think it's essentially a way for creators to have another revenue stream, which is great for the creators and great for the platforms if they're getting a chunk of that as well. I think if you really like a creator, you will pay for that exclusive content. You know, if you're part of a group where you receive early links to videos or any other behind the scenes type of content, I think people will go for it. I know that on Patreon it's very like YouTube. A lot of YouTubers use Patreon. I think you can get to like decide what the next video is going to be about, or you can see like an early clip. So if they use it in the same way on Twitter, I don't see why that wouldn't be really exciting for people. I don't know how well it would take off, because Twitter's obviously such a short what's the word I'm looking for, like short form type of content, so you know, it's obviously really small, so the cost versus the return needs to be equal perhaps, but I think it's really interesting, and the fact that Twitter sort of seen a trend and trying to hop on it, you know, makes sense since there's such a limited platform of what you can do. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, see, I have reservations about this. And I think, like you said, Nicole, I think we briefly discussed it in a previous podcast. The thing is, for me, is Twitter is obviously, like, Twitter was one of the first, like, social media platforms that I had, like, seen many years ago. And for me, I've been seeing, or over the years, have seen really great content. I've seen exclusive content from creators or celebrities. I've seen humorous content. I've seen all of that. So I'm like, how is this going to be different other than the fact that people are going to have to pay for it? I think that's where sort of my reservation lies, in the differentiation between like how the content is going to change. And I also think, you know, a lot of content creators and celebrities and influencers and all of that like cross post to an extent. So is it going to be, you know, exclusive to Twitter, in which case, like, would then people on Instagram be like, oh, I'm not getting the content I want from this person anymore? I don't know. I don't know if it's a little too late.
I think I agree with you there. I think there are some people that I can think of maybe on TikTok or Instagram. I'm not sure that maybe I'd pay if their content's amazing to see it. But Twitter, I don't know if it's just sort of the visual aspect that I like of TikTok and Instagram, but I'm not too sure who I would pay to see their content. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Maybe more of a, like, I know on Twitter a Q&A is like super popular. So if you paid extra to have an exclusive preview of their tweets, you could send in a question, you know, beforehand, and you're able to see their responses, and you're part of like an exclusive thread where the celebrity or creator is probably more likely to respond to your question since you're part of a smaller group. So maybe stuff like that could be beneficial, like rather than the just tweets you get access to. Like if the tweets are behind the scenes of when they're at a show, or like behind the scenes of them creating their new video. Like I think you're right, Jordan and Laura. I think it needs to be important enough. It needs to provide enough value for it to actually make sense. So perhaps if it is those like personal connections, which I think is really important on Twitter, it's like as if you're actually communicating with that person. If it's like a Q&A or that kind of thing, it might be beneficial.
Well, going on from that, on the article, it did say that they're going to introduce more, they're going to call it audio rooms or something like that, which is just basically exclusive access for different communities to maybe chat to themselves without other people watching and things like that. But it does make me sort of think maybe eventually it could turn into sort of a new way for artists to like maybe share music with just a few people, or I don't know if you've seen like brands like Misguided, they would every now and then they'll do a thing where they tweet and say, okay, this product is free on our website for the next so and so minutes, go and get it. Could they maybe ask their audience to pay in to then get free stuff? I don't know how that would work, but just an idea.
Wow. It's super interesting. We're definitely going to have to watch that space. I'm excited to see where Twitter's heading in the future, absolutely. But speaking of monetization, while we're on the topic, Pinterest is launching its first ever B2B campaign following the current e-commerce boom. Nicole, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, totally. So I feel like I've been really riding the Pinterest train recently. I've really been impressed with their results I've just personally seen from their ads. And I think the platform is really, as you said, Chloe, like really pushing their advertising platform at the moment. And now they're talking about B2B advertising, which is something you don't necessarily associate with Pinterest. But I totally think people should. I think the biggest misconception with B2B marketing is that it's boring, or is that because you're speaking to another business that it can't be fun. And I think it's so crazy to me because yes, perhaps it needs to be a bit more professional because you're talking about, a specific service, you're selling to another business, but that doesn't mean it can't be fun. And it doesn't mean that you will only be able to advertise on LinkedIn because that's where business people are, like business owners specifically use Pinterest, and you will be able to find like a whole new audience on there, I reckon, especially with sort of the values of Pinterest, of making your own things and discovering new resources. So I think that's really interesting. I think I definitely sort of recommend to any social media manager listening now, like to check out Pinterest because I think they're really cool, and also watch this space because Chloe has an interview with a Pinterest rep coming out like next week, perhaps, Chloe, is that right?
We do.
Which is really interesting. So the fact that they are currently pushing for lots of new people to join the platform, it's probably a good time to give it a try. And also just in general to be creative with any sort of B2B ads, I think it's just important, guys. Like, just because you're a business owner doesn't mean that you're boring. Maybe it does for some, but not all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to quote Rachel, who her episode will be coming out next Monday, she was saying that Pinterest is a great way. It's somewhere you go to meet new people and to like discover new ideas, whereas, other social media platforms are perhaps for people you already know, and that it's harder to find new people because you have to search it yourself, whereas Pinterest really is like just a massive glorified search engine. So it's quite like a good idea, I think, for businesses to get on there and start advertising to other businesses as well as consumers. So Pinterest is coming out with a lot of exciting new features, we'll talk about it further in the next episode. But I love this. I think it's great. Yeah, I wonder what a good example of this would be. Like, does anyone have any ideas, like, what kind of businesses would really, like, be able to take advantage of this sort of thing?
It's a good question. I think when I think of Pinterest, I immediately think of, like, DIY and do-it-yourself type stuff. So maybe, okay, this is a live brainstorm, the way my brain is working right now. I'm thinking of, like, weddings. Like, weddings are huge on Pinterest, right? So any kind of business, I think immediately you think the ads that you'll run will be to the consumers, to the brides themselves. But what about the other venues that hosts the weddings? Like, can you run some ads that are collaborating with and looking for the venues of hotels so that you can get your items in the hotels where people have weddings, things like that, potentially?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was thinking. And even things like crafts or home design things, can they be targeted at perhaps bigger retailers or perhaps small businesses pitching to slightly bigger businesses in order to sort of launch, or like you said, Nicole, sort of collaborate with them and resell these products? Because I think like Pinterest has expanded so much in like recent years, from although a huge portion of it is sort of home design or home inspiration. It's expanded into so much more now. So I think there's a huge avenue for that, and I think it's a really great idea that Pinterest are doing that.
Right, well, I want to talk a little bit about one of the best stories being shared across social media this month, which is the Duel of Joshes, which took place over the weekend in Nebraska, USA. Did you guys catch this, or am I the only one who...
I didn't catch this, so I'm super interested to hear more.
Okay, well, let me fill you in. Basically, through pure boredom during the very beginning of the pandemic, like we're talking April 2020, a guy named Josh Swain sent a Facebook message to dozens of other people who shared his first and last name. So he sent them some coordinates and invited them to battle it out over their shared name, and the winner would keep the name of Josh Swain. Basically, this message then became a massive meme and was shared across social media, and what started out as a joke then turned into this huge event. I think they set up like a Facebook page for it, and it suddenly just became this mass event. So over the weekend, hundreds of people turned up to battle it out with pool noodles, of all things. And in the end, a 4-year-old Josh Swain was deemed the ultimate Josh, which I love. Basically, the original Josh, who invited everyone, used the fight to raise money for charity, and he even hosted a food drive at the event itself. So while maybe not everyone across the world knew about this, it was certainly a big event in the US, and I think it's an awesome example of how easy it is for things to go viral these days, especially during the pandemic. I mean, we've seen all sorts just absolutely blow up. And of course, how social media can be used to spread joy and do good. Like, I'm not sure how much they raised at the event itself, but I just think that that's such a good idea to do that for something that silly, and that turned out to be such a big thing. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts of it now that you've heard the short rundown.
Do you know what? I think that just shows how, I think that shows the best side of social media. Like, following on from what you said, Chloe, it shows how easy things can go viral. Like, if you get a few people jump on it, the likely chances that a few people more are going to jump on it, and then a few more people are going to jump on it. It's just going to continue. And I think, one, that sounds really fun, and obviously I don't live in the US and my name's not Josh, but anything to get a pool noodle out. No, I think it just shows the best side of social media, and I think it shows how easy it is to sort of build a community as well, just based on one sort of unique characteristic.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds awesome. I love when something goes viral, like, accidentally, and then they turn it into a good cause, I love that he's then donated stuff to charity. Like, that's really great. It reminds me of the World Record Egg Instagram page. I don't know if you remember that. It was just a post of an egg, and that wanted to beat Kylie Jenner's record for the most liked post ever, and it broke that record. And then a few weeks later, they posted the egg with a little crack in it, and it said, like, it's okay to talk, like, we all have bad days, and they turned it into like a mental health page, and now there's a whole charity behind it. Like, how cool is that? I think it was just some random guy who thought it'd be funny to post a picture of an egg, and it somehow went viral, and now there's a whole message behind it about mental health. Like, it's so cool. There are a lot of negatives to social media that sometimes people focus on, but I think there are so many positives as well, and stories like this make you think about that, and it's always just fun to read that kind of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we saw it, didn't we, earlier this year with Bernie Sanders. Obviously, he very unintentionally went viral, and then obviously used that to sell his merch, which then was donated to a charity as well. And then a couple years ago, maybe we saw, maybe even last year, another Instagram post, which was for every like, we'll plant a tree, or for something, every 100 likes or something. So it's so awesome to see, and I love that side of social media, and it's also, like, as an audience and as, I guess, a consumer, it's really fun to kind of jump on board. Like, I'm sure we all liked the egg, and I know that I went and double tapped for a tree to be planted. So yeah, it's super cool. Well, now we've covered some of April's best stories, it's time to get into the calendar update, which is the segment at the end of each monthly review, which highlights some of the key dates coming up for the month ahead. Nicole, why don't you get us started with something very exciting happening in May?
I knew you'd love this, Chloe. I picked out May the 4th, which is obviously May the Force be with you, Star Wars Day, as it's widely known. I think it's a great opportunity for brands to jump on board with a bit of fun content. I've made a note of some that I've previously liked, and anyone can take inspiration from this. So I think it's called Logitech. They do like cameras for laptops, things like that. They did a few tweets last year, I think, on whether you prefer the light or dark side. I think that kind of stuff is fun with a lot of people. I think they sell different versions of their cameras, so that was quite cutesy, I thought. NASA obviously always jump on board the Star Wars Day trend. They always have a bunch of stuff like that, so definitely look out for what they post this year. And then I also saw NASCAR. I think it's a company in the US, but they made a little gif of a tire rolling down a track, and then they made it look like a BB-8, so that was fun. So there's always a really good opportunity to get creative with Star Wars Day, I think, because people love that kind of stuff. So it's my challenge to come up with a few ideas this year for different client posts, and I encourage everyone to do the same.
I'll be looking out for that, Nicole. Make sure you send me the drafts. I'd love to see. Well, I'll just jump in here. Before we get into May 4th, we have May 1st, which is Global Love Day, which I just thought is super cute, and it's something that absolutely everyone can jump on top of. I think this year especially, we all need a little bit of love in our lives. So that's coming up quite soon, so make sure you jump on top of that. Laura, any days you have in mind for us?
So, one of the best days, I think, is National Smile Day. This is on the 31st of May. I thought this was a good day to mention because, smiling is the best thing, right?
Perfect opportunity for a meet the team type post,
Absolutely.
World Smile Day, get all your team smiling for a post. I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's such a good opportunity for brands to sort of jump on board and get their team involved, I think. Show some smiles. Let's, fill social media with smiles. And I think it'll be a good day.
I can see it now, all the match the smile to the celebrity posts that will be coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love those, so I'm all for it. Jordan, what dates have you got in mind?
So my day is actually a month, so May is photo month. So I just thought it'd be sort of easy for all companies and brands to really get into and just actually post something visual, maybe to test out something new on Instagram, or I thought it could be a great way for brands to post any user-generated content.
Yeah. I was going to say, great idea for a competition, like a month-long, I guess if you're a photography company or that kind of thing, it could be a photo a day from a user. So I love that. Awesome. Well, that is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, or follow us if you're listening on Spotify. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's stories, so make sure you reach out on social media and let us know what you thought. We've been Giraffe Social Media. You've been amazing. We'll see you next time.